So I had you do a simple calculator in class, and this is what I came up with, where I have a simple form with two input text fields and a third one that I fill in with the result, and three buttons. So I can add two numbers here, and I can add them together. That gives me 407. I can subtract them, gives me 347. Multiply them, gives me a big number. Or divide 377 by 30. And so I wrote it up here to see what is actually happening. So I can go back to 2 and 2 and add them together. I get 4, I get 0, I get 4, I get 1. All right, so that's what I wanted you to build. So let's go through and do that quickly. The first thing I start out when I think of a problem like this is I build the form. And since I want to fill in that form and have PHP reload the same page all the time, I want to have that all in the PHP brackets instead of outside in the normal HTML. So I'm going to do something like echoing out end of, remember this multi-line string that acts like a double-quoted string, and I can just start adding my form in here. My method is going to be a get, just because I want to see the operands in the page. So here's what they look like. I'm getting them through my query string up here. num1 equals 2, num2 equals 2, result equals 4, and submit equals divide. So it does all of that submission. And I do that as a get first, so I can see the variables go through. It's a lot easier to debug. Then form always needs an action. And we're going to go to the same file, and in this case I'm calling it calc1. So calc1.php. And we need an end of form. And then, nicely indented, we need some input tags. So I need an input type equals text for my first one. And I'm going to name it so I can get it out of the PHP array as num1. And I'm going to put the value of some future variable that I'm going to call num1 as well. I don't have that yet, but it needs a value to put in the text field. And then I'm going to put a break tag, so I have a bunch of these. So I'm going to need 3 of these text fields. So I'm going to copy and paste 3 of them. Name this one 2 and 2. And what am I going to call this one? Result. Okay, sounds good. And we'll call this a $ result as a PHP variable. Then I need 4 different buttons, and each button I want to submit the form. So I can actually make these as 4 inputs with a type equals submit, so that every single button will submit the form for me. I don't have to do any special coding or anything on that. So I'm going to name these all the same thing, and you'll see why in a minute. But the value is going to be different for each one. The value is going to be something like plus and minus and multiply a word or something that I can use to do that. So all of these are going to be the same. The value is going to be different. Multiply, divide. All right, so I've got 3 buttons. So let's start with the form and see if my form actually looks right. So let's go to calc1. And I've got 3 input fields, and these all post back to the same place. You can see in my query string, I'm getting nothing in the values. But if I put something here, it's going to print them out to the query string. So I get all these values. And the submit button changes based on which button I choose. So if I choose divide, notice the value of submit changes to divide. Multiply, that changes to multiply. So I can tell in my PHP code which button they selected. That's the important part, right? Knowing how they selected it. Any questions on that so far? So that's how I tackle the problem. I think of how am I going to get the data from the user first. And I might go back and change this, but at least that gives me some starting point. So now I need to get those values from the arrays that PHP give me So what array am I going to get the values from? All right, in my action here, this tells me that I'm using a get, so I need to use the get array on the input side. If I made this post, then it would be the post array. So it depends on how you set up your form. So I'm going to look at it from the get side, and we're going to put, nope, it's an array, square brackets, and we're going to get the value of my submit button. Oh, that's the problem. My insert key got messed up. Which is what? What is the value that I use for my input buttons to get that out of this get array? That tells me what the value is set to, but how do I look up submit, right? The name of each of these elements in the form is how I look the data up in the get or the post array. So I'm going to use the name, which is submit, and they can only hit one button at a time because that submits the form. So I will only ever have one value here. So the operand that I'm going to get is going to be a word like plus, minus, multiply, divide. Then I need to get my num1. It's going to be from the same get array. And what am I going to call that then? Num1, very good. So the name of this text box is num1. That's the key value pair that I want to get back out. And my num2 is going to be similar. Get of num2. And my result, I don't care what comes from the people. I'm going to give my own result. So I'm going to create the result. Let's now echo out the values. I always like to see what I get back. So I'm going to echo out my num1, my op, and my num2. Let's see what happens here. I always like to build it a little bit at a time and make sure that this works. So if I run this again, I get an echo problem, line 16. I'm missing a semicolon. There we go, very good. Run it again. Plus, minus. If I put values in here, I'm going to get the values 377 divide, multiply, 4, etc. All right? So that way I know I'm getting the right values from the form. Everything is all happy here. We have happy coding. Happy coding by Dave. That's like a little painting. Remember that? Painting by Dave. All right, whatever. So now I have to determine what to do with these numbers. So how would I do that? How do I actually add the two numbers together? All right, I might check to see that they're not empty. If they are empty, it's going to be a null value, so it's going to be 0. But then what would I do? How do I know that they want to add the numbers in the first place?
Compare the string and op against different values, like plus.
All right, I might do something like if op equals add, or what did I say, plus. Then I want to do something. I want to set my result variable to be something like num1 plus num2, right? All right, and let's run that and see if that's going to work. I can add these two together. Look at that. Is that sweet? You can put a 2 here. 2 plus 4 should be 6. Very nice. These don't do anything, so I don't care about those. And to answer the other question, if I put nothing in here, nothing plus 4 should give me 4. Let's see if it actually does. Yes. So nothing is considered a 0, so that's okay. How about if I put a letter in here? It's going to be 4 because this evaluates to 0. So the number comes out right. It's just not completely error checked. All right, so I could do a bunch of if statements here. If op equals minus, then I'm going to do a minus. If op equals whatever, I'm going to do a multiplication. But I wanted to introduce you to another method, another programming construct called the switch statement, which a lot of languages have. And it's a way of going through a bunch of operations at the same time. So I want to switch on whatever the value that is in op. I want to do something. All right? And the way we determine that, it's like a bunch of if, then, else statements all pushed together. I use the case. If the value is, you can read this like if the value is plus, then a semicolon, then I want to do a couple of statements. I want to do something like result equals num1 plus num2. And then to tell it that this is the end of my if statement here, I put a break command. So that is, if op equals plus, do these statements. And I can have a bunch of these statements. It's like an if block. Then it's going to come down, I have another case statement. If it's minus, I'm going to do something different. And so the whole thing looks like this. Let's see, the whole switch. If I were to do that, we've got to have these all looking right here. This is how you indent a switch statement, according to Dave. All right, and in reality, when I'm coding in the real world, I actually make these all line up as well. If I can get them to line up. All of the colons, and then all of these line up here. I know you might think I'm a little anal about this, but too bad. Pardon me? Coning, yes, exactly. And then a lot of times I put vertical spacing in here to make that more readable. Then I can have multiple lines of code in here, and they would all be at this level. I could do something else, result, whatever, inside of that. All right, any questions on the switch statement? Does that make sense? This is like if op equals plus, do this. If op equals minus, do this. If op equals multiply, do this, etc. So now let's see if this actually works. Put a 2 here. I can add them. I get 6. Minus, I didn't fix, oh, I did. Minus, I get -2. 2 minus 4 is -2. Multiply them, I get 8. Divide them, I get 0.5. Isn't that cool? Now, any questions on what I've done so far? It works, right? That's a nice little calculator. And it's not very many lines of code. 42 lines of code exactly. Look at that. Is that nice? So I can actually make this a little more efficient, albeit slightly more dangerous. But there's a way that I can use in PHP is a method called the eval statement. And what it does is it takes a string and tries to evaluate it as if that was PHP code. And you can only do this in scripting type languages like Ruby and PHP and Python. Regular compiled languages don't like to do this. I can't take text as code and have the computer figure it out nicely. So there's a method called eval. So for instance, let's just echo out something like this. Echo the eval of 2 plus 2. What do you think that's going to be?
4.
All right, so let's run this. What did I, line 14, what did I do wrong? All right, and so it evaluated 2 plus 2, but I didn't tell it to do anything. So I need to echo I need to echo this out, I can echo out the value of adding 2 and 2 together. So I made a whole PHP string, and this is going to evaluate it as a string. So I get 4 here, right? This is the 4 that I get from all of that. Does everybody see that? So I can evaluate text, and if I created a string, I could evaluate that into a real multiplication or division. So if I change my values down here to actually be the operands, this is just a fun thing. This isn't required at anything. If I change those to the actual values and reload this, now it has a plus and a minus, but the value that I get back is the actual operand. Okay, so I might get a plus back or something like that. Let's see if this will actually work. So now I can create a string that is the evaluation of all of these together. I can just say eval, I want to have my result equivalent to num1, let's see, op, and then num2. And then semicolon. I don't. Let's see if this will work. I think I might have some issues here, but let's do a 2 minus a 4 equals, unexpected equals in evaled code on line 1. All right, so it doesn't like this. So let's print this out and see what happens. Let's echo out this whole thing and see what it looks like. This was going to be so easy. Now it's not. Just too bad. All right. Let's do that. All right. So I have to escape the dollar sign. This is interesting. And let's see if this actually gives me a result now. Look at that. So this is actual code that I created from strings, evaluated it in PHP, and let it do its thing. So I can do 22 minus 4 is 18. And so I don't even need any of this switch statement. Let's take this out completely. Hopefully this will still work. Look at that. Is that cool? Isn't that sweet? Now I'm afraid, oh, these are going to work. Look at that. So with one line of code, basically, this eval, I don't even need these. These are echoing it out. With one line of code, I'm taking all these values because I set up my form right to do this. Now, what's the problem with this? Well, I'm doing that. This is creating a new variable called result from the eval, and I'm putting that here. So that's creating the result variable in the eval statement itself. Isn't that fun? Now, what's the problem with that, though? Injection, right? I can change this form around if I just look at the source code and change this value to be anything I want, and it would change this eval statement. Anytime you evaluate anything from a user is a dangerous proposition because they can type anything in and cause your program to crash or access your database or anything like that. But I just wanted to show you as a fun thing how you can manipulate the data. Scripting languages are great for this kind of stuff. It's fun. Yeah, you'd have to do some validation on here, do some regular expression validation or something to strip those out, maybe something like that. You can do the strip stuff that I did before. Where are those special characters and the, I don't remember where I did them now. Yeah, HTML special characters, strip slashes, trim. There were like 4 that you could do. That helps a little bit, but if I'm going to do eval, I'm going to make sure it's tight. You know, there's nothing that can get by but numbers or something like that. All right, isn't that fun? Wasn't that fun?
So basically, we would, for security purposes, we never want to.
You'd probably never want to do that, but I wanted to show it just as I showed you the right way, and then I showed you this is a cool way.
Right.
So, all right. Any questions on that? All right, we're going to start MySQL tomorrow. So come with your DreamHost accounts. We have to create MySQL databases on your DreamHost accounts.